happen. We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Hum.
I'm Ann Northrup.
And in the news this week, after numerous judicial wins for the marriage equality movement, a state judge in Tennessee has dealt us a defeat on same-sex marriage. We're going to talk about whether it's a big setback or a blip.
I'm tempted to give it away, but I'll make you listen. Voters in Chattanooga, Tennessee, overwhelmingly repealed their LGBT rights ordinance, and the city council in Billings, Montana, rejected one out of hand.
Hold on to your hats. Same-sex marriage could commence in Virginia on Wednesday unless the Supreme Court intervenes.
I'm betting they will, but we'll see. I've been wrong before. We'll analyze the Sixth Circuit hearing on 6 same-sex marriage cases last week. Was that a tongue twister you made me do?
No, I didn't try to do that.
Sally sells seashells by the seashore.
Very sad story. Discrimination even in death. A church in Tampa canceled the funeral of a gay man when they discovered that he was had married another man. I guess that's how he discovered he was gay.
Gay Games 9 has opened in Cleveland.
In Uganda, 100 brave activists marched for LGBT pride.
All right.
Take some guts there.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of guts.
And there were protests around the world in support of gay Jamaicans and in opposition to the anti-gay laws there, and a disturbing display that we will show you on videotape of a mob of homophobic people on the island going after a gay man. The
controversy over mandatory condom use in adult filmmaking continues, and actually it's extended to possible mandatory testing.
Yes. Better news here on Broadway, where the long-awaited Broadway debut of the musical Fun Home, based on Alison Bechdel's book, is now expected in the spring.
And I will give you an historical note on the gay 90s in Paris, based on a visit to the Museum of Museum of Modern Art. You know, I get my MoMAs and my Mets and my this, you know, I go to all of them. To keep you posted and informed.
Before we get to all the marriage news, and there is a lot of it, I think we should make note of the fact that at least a dozen, maybe more, maybe 24 by now, major LGBT national organizations have signed on to a letter in support of the community in
Ferguson,
Missouri,
outside of St. Louis,
where poor Michael Brown was shot dead by a cop who, as we tape, has not been identified yet. And this business of the cops as an occupying military force who are going after citizens.
Well, they've got 50 white cops and 3 black cops in a town that's 2/3 African American.
Yes. But what they're doing in reaction to protests about the killing is the cops go into the neighborhood like SWAT teams, and people who are standing in their own backyards protesting get told to disperse.
Well,
disperse.
We got our own problems here in New York with the Eric Garner case.
Exactly.
I mean, here in New York, by the way, Ferguson, Missouri is the hometown of our old friend Donald Suggs.
Oh, yeah?
Yes,
yeah,
who was the board member here, late board member here at MNN, who got us on the television here many years ago.
And who appeared on our show several times.
Great activist.
But we talk here every week about violence committed against our communities, particularly transgender women of color who get murdered at a very high rate, and physical attacks and name-calling. And there just needs to be this solidarity again across communities in the face of attacks.
We need policing by people who work with communities to keep the peace.
Yes.
Not to just keep us in line. And this was a case with Michael Brown from all outward purposes. What were they doing? They were walking in the street.
Yeah.
They weren't walking on the sidewalk. And then the cops get all bent out of shape. And if you give them any attitude, they're going to start getting shoved around. And that's what happened to Eric Garner in Staten Island, New York. He was selling loose cigarettes. For this, he gets the death penalty, a chokehold, and is killed. So the first thing Mayor de Blasio in New York does is he has Al Sharpton and a bunch of African-American leaders, say what for in front of him and the police commissioner. And he gets criticized for that by the white press. I'll say it outright, the Post, the News, people like that. So who does he invite to unite us all, to bring us all together? Cardinal Dolan, an anti-gay bigot, who was not going to bring anybody together, who was covered up pedophile scandals, etc. This guy is a creep. This is the same mayor who thinks it'd be a great idea to bring the Pope here. Everybody would welcome him.
Well, and the story also out of Missouri in this police department is that there was a cop who was a whistleblower about racist policies of the police, and he was moved out of his local precinct.
Shoot the messenger.
Exactly, and band together as a military force, and everybody else is the enemy, and you're not there to work with the community, you're there to work against the community.
I can't believe the police, most of them, unless they're sadists, are happy doing work this way. That they would, because you hear about the pressures that cops are under, the suicides among cops and all that kind of stuff, because of what they're asked to do by their superiors in order to keep order. I think they'd be happier working in a kind of a system that worked with the community more, came from the community, etc., which made everybody more protected.
Well, and then you have the case in Washington, D.C., where a police captain who supervises the LGBT and other specialty units has been accused of harassing a gay officer there, Officer Justin Markowitz. He kept calling him Justine in emails, in person, at roll calls, just on a continuing basis. And so that's being investigated. It's a terrible atmosphere in these departments.
And we're all in this together, folks.
We'd like to think we are.
And we all need to stand up when these kinds of injustices happen.
While it's certainly just a soft gesture for these LGBT organizations like the Human Rights Campaign and GLTF and the transgender groups and people of color groups and everyone to sign on to a letter of sympathy for the family of Michael Brown and against this kind of violence, it is meaningful to speak up.
Yes.
More on that in a minute, but speaking up is a key element here, and we cannot remain silent. Okay. So that's why we're shooting off our mouths.
Okay.
But we'll get to other news now.
All right. Well, on the marriage front, just today as we tape on Wednesday, the Fourth Circuit denied a stay in the Virginia case where the judge there overturned the ban on same-sex marriage. They could start on Wednesday unless the Supreme Court stays. Now, the question is who would appeal this at this point, since state officials are not appealing?
Well, the request to the Fourth Circuit for a stay on allowing marriages, now that the Fourth Circuit has struck down the ban on marriages, came from a county clerk, and presumably she could continue to go to the Supreme Court with this request.
Not generally the type of person that the Supreme Court wants to be making a request of that nature. Huh?
Well, unclear. Technically, why not? She has to perform the marriages, but there are details about who controls the clerks and what their rights to sue are. But the real answer, I think, in this case is that when the Supreme Court has been asked to issue a stay on these marriage decisions, they have issued a stay. And in some states like Pennsylvania, they haven't been asked to issue a stay. So so marriages are taking place in Pennsylvania. So I suspect if someone goes to the Supreme Court and asks for a stay, they're likely to get it, even though I think that's sort of nonsensical to issue stays in these cases when there are 19 states in the District of Columbia where these marriages are legal. Why stop them in these other states?
Well, the reason may be the little case in Tennessee A state judge there ruled that neither the federal government nor another state should be allowed to dictate to Tennessee what has traditionally been a state responsibility in terms of who can get married. This is a Roane County Circuit Judge, Russell Simmons Jr. of Kingston, said that the Windsor decision does not undercut state authority, and he relied on the Baker v. Nelson, which is the old Minnesota case from 1972. The Supreme Court didn't make any decision. It just said, for want of a federal issue, we ain't taking the case.
Well, he's right about something. He is right that the Windsor decision did not mandate legal same-sex marriage across the country. But what all these courts have done that have struck down state bans is they've said the reasoning in Windsor about equal protection and due process is what we're relying on in striking these bans on same-sex marriage.
Mainly from Justice Scalia's dissent, where he actually wrote, "Here's what they're going to be saying in the federal courts out now. Here's what they're going to be saying," and then they are saying it.
Well, I have always thought it was a little facetious for these courts to say that the Windsor decision mandated striking the bans, but what they mandate is an equal protection analysis and due process. And what this Tennessee judge has done is ignore that part of it and has refused to undertake any consideration of equal protection.
Well, you would say a blip?
I would say a blip. Here's why, among other reasons, because the Tennessee law is already at the Sixth Circuit and has been argued in this big...
Which we're going to talk about, but we may, and the Sixth Circuit was the big jamboree this past week. Kentucky, Michigan, Ohio, and Tennessee, 6 cases, 4 states, 3 judges. Everybody says it's likely to be a 2-to-1 decision, but they don't know which way it's going to go.
Yes.
There was a very conservative judge, and there was a liberal judge, and then there was a conservative judge, Jeffrey Sutton. He's the swing vote. He was a Bush appointee. A lot of Bush appointees have ruled our way. He brought up Baker v. Nelson.
He did.
He said SCOTUS has not overruled,
well, they haven't because their opportunity to do so was in the Prop 8 case, but rather than deciding the Prop 8 case as a question of should marriage be mandated as legal for same-sex couples, they said there's a procedural question here of standing, and so we're sending this back and relying on sending it to the lower court decision.
But just as in the New York case, which we lost in 2005, this judge Sutton was said, "What about the democratic process? Why are you letting 5 Supreme Court justices decide this? Let the states work it out through the democratic process." And
because you don't let voters vote on fundamental human rights. That's why.
What do you mean? We've been doing that for decades now.
I don't care. That's why we're winning these cases, because you don't have to let voters decide on fundamental human rights.
Because there's animus on the part of the voters.
And because the whole analysis is that if you have a definable discrete group and you can prove that they have been the subject of discrimination unnecessarily or inappropriately, then you protect them from that discrimination.
I'm very glad you're here because I have a question. So does a split, if this court rules against us 2-to-1, let's just say.
Yes.
First of all, we could try to get the whole Sixth Circuit to hear it en banc, as they say.
Correct.
Try.
Yes.
But the thing is, if we get a bad decision out of the Sixth Circuit, does that accelerate the process by which the Supreme Court steps in or not?
Well, that's an unanswerable question because we don't know whether they're inclined to, we already have cases that are being appealed to the Supreme Court, so they might be inclined to take those anyway. But does it give them a better rationale for taking this question of same-sex marriage? Sure, because then you have the traditional conflicts between different circuit courts.
But it's happened very fast. It's just happened very fast. I mean, they did Windsor. They didn't do the whole nationwide hearing. All they did is say that if the states do it, the federal government has to recognize it. And that's all that they did. They did not declare a right to same-sex marriage, and this would be fast if they do. If they do it within the next year and a half.
Well, all these cases are fast. No one expected this kind of propulsion in these cases in the first place.
Well, it's happening. Also,
yes, it is.
There was other bad news from Tennessee. Chattanooga, victory for bigotry. The voters there repealed an ordinance which was passed 5-4 in 2013 to protect city employees from anti-LGBT discrimination and extended health benefits to same-sex partners. Folks, this lost 63 to 37%. And it was really off the radar of a lot of us. Apparently, HRC put some people on the ground, but there was no...
But they didn't tell anyone.
We didn't talk about it on Gay USA, did we?
No. But I do have a little silver lining in the Tennessee primary election results.
Yes?
The voters did repeal the Chattanooga Sond agenda, but the Tennessee State Senator Stacey Campfield, who's the one who put out the Don't Say Gay law for schools and has done everything bad to gay people for years, lost his Republican primary. How did that happen?
Is the new person better or worse?
Hard to tell. He's the one who also tried to join the Black Caucus in the legislature. He's a white guy.
Well, you know, we're all brothers and sisters.
Well, I want to finish off marriage news before we get too deeply into these.
We have non-gay people in the LGBT caucus in Congress.
Different. In Utah, the gay plaintiffs have, in the marriage case there, which we have won so far, have joined the request to the Supreme Court to take the appeal of the case.
So both sides want the appeal taken by the Supreme Court, even though we won.
Even though we won, we want a national decision. So rather than just saying, okay, we won at the state level or the circuit level, let's leave it at that, we are saying, we are so confident now, some might say arrogant, that we are going to the Supreme Court and saying, go ahead, hear our case.
And Oklahoma's asking the U.S. Supremes to hear the case, too.
The Utah crowd, which includes the local attorneys and the National Center for Lesbian Rights, have also hired a new attorney in the case, a former U.S. Solicitor General in the Clinton administration, Neil Katyal. I don't know his name, but they're up in the ante.
Yeah, go Texas, ahead. 60 lawmakers signed a letter supporting the Attorney General's appeal of the order to allow gays to marry. They say it will lead to, quote, incest, pedophilia, and polygamy. Well, maybe it will in Texas, but it hasn't happened here in New York, where we have marriage.
In Omaha, the Motor Vehicles Department has refused a license name change to a lesbian who married in Iowa and then moved to Omaha, right across the border. She has to now go through a whole going to court to get her name changed things. Normally, if you get married, you can go to the DMV and get your name changed on your license automatically.
Right.
But because Nebraska does not recognize same-sex marriage, they're going to put her through the ringer.
Sad story out of Pennsylvania. One of the plaintiffs in the successful suit versus the ban on same-sex marriage has died. Well, this is Fredia Hurdle, 50 years old. She's survived by her partner, Lynn Hurdle, but she died of a stroke. And I said partner because even though they won the case, they never legally got married. They were waiting until after her daughter's long-planned wedding in October.
Exactly.
So now she died without her marriage rights.
And they'd been together for 24 years.
Very sad.
Very sad.
And if you need to get married, just go down to City Hall and do it. You can have a ceremony later. On
the other hand, if you're in Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania, don't go to the WW Bridal Boutique looking for your wedding dress because they have refused to sell dresses to lesbian brides on the grounds that it would break God's law. Providing those two girls' dresses for a sanctified marriage would break God's law. This is love thy neighbor, not thyself. I mean, as thyself. I don't know. It's not against the law to do this in Pennsylvania. What she's doing because they don't have a non-discrimination law. And but the Bloomsburg's town council is going to consider an anti-discrimination ordinance in light of this. Well, see, you come up with the evidence, and they consider doing it. In Mississippi, the Campaign for Southern Equality, which is the great regional group now in the South. They have a We Do campaign. And they're going around challenging bans on same-sex marriage everywhere. And this week, they sent couples in 6 or 8 counties into the license bureaus or registration bureaus to register their out-of-state legal same-sex marriages.
How about that Rand Paul? Well, he says, we're not going to be the pro-gay marriage party, but we can become a bigger tent so I can get elected president. Oh, he didn't say it that way. He has betrayed his libertarian roots by saying he is in favor of a constitutional amendment against same-sex marriage. But these guys are all probably rooting for the Supreme Court to resolve this before the 2016 election.
I would like to propose a new political party. It's called the Hypocrites Party. And the Situational Ethics Party.
Obama was a hypocrite on this as well.
Absolutely.
Opposed same-sex marriage, even though he supported it as a state senator.
All right, so now is this case in Tampa hypocritical or, in fact, standing up for one's values? The New Hope Missionary Baptist Church canceled the funeral of a married gay man. His
less than 24 hours before the funeral.
Called his mother when she was standing by his casket at the wake.
Well, he said, I have to, another one who said, I have to stand up for God's law.
Right.
I mean, God's law is to treat people like crap? I don't think so.
Well, exactly. And who are they to make these judgments?
Well,
They
do worship a vengeful God.
Well, do they refuse funerals to people who violate other supposed principles in the Bible?
Look, I remember in the early days of the AIDS crisis, I went to a synagogue way out in Brooklyn for a very prominent gay leader who was, in politics, and I had no idea that they were not even going to acknowledge the part. This is in the early '80s, and I was furious. Why do people put themselves also through this with ceremonies at anti-gay institutions?
Well, people are naive, and this is how the public is getting educated, because they're running up against these situations time after time, and it doesn't occur to them beforehand that this is going to happen to them, because they're just regular people living their regular lives and doing their regular things, and it does not cross their minds that someone is going to call them at the wake and say, we're not burying your son after all. All right, so
well, you know what? They don't let them get married. They don't let us get married there either.
Yeah, exactly. So, which brings us to Billings, Montana, which had a proposed non-discrimination ordinance defeated at 3 o'clock in the morning at the city council by a vote.
It was close.
6-5. The mayor broke the tie.
Tom Hanel, Hanel.
Maybe.
Yeah.
He said, I don't object to most of this. It's just that restroom stuff.
Well, it would, because it covers public accommodations, it would be covered in restrooms and locker rooms. This reminds me of John Glenn when he was running for president. One of his prominent New York supporters was a big liberal, and we said, you can't support him. He's not supporting the federal, he's not supporting, getting rid of the ban on gays in the military. You got to make him do that, or we're not going to even support you. So Glenn meets with a bunch of gay leaders, and he a lot of pressure, and he goes, well, okay, but not in the YMCA's. Too late, John.
So anyway,
that's what people think about.
I know they do, and what they don't realize is that they're dealing with that on a daily basis to begin with. It's just become evident, and then they freak out. So in Billings, first of all, they're casting this vote in the middle of a celebration of the 30-year anniversary, maybe it's not 30, I think it's 30, of a not in our town anti-hate ordinance that they passed.
Oh, that was their way of dealing with gay rights?
Well, whatever they did. No, it was probably bullying or something.
The town that's too busy to hate, not Atlanta,
exactly.
Right?
But meanwhile, we'll pass this ordinance. And I have a very good friend who lives in Billings who was a high school classmate of mine, so I've been corresponding with her about this. And so she's been telling me that these are religious right fanatics who are doing this, and they're mean and thoughtless and insane. And her husband and her son testified in favor of the ordinance, and she was writing letters to the newspaper. And I said, look, you just have to keep speaking out, and you have no idea how meaningful it is to LGBT people to have straight allies speaking out. And sometimes it seems like speaking out doesn't mean anything, or that it's too hard, but it really is the most powerful thing you can do.
Let me explain something. The gay rights ordinance in New York City, which was the first one in the country that was ever conceived in '71, had about 15 public hearings, and we lost about 15 votes before we won that thing in 1986. We were one of the last big cities to do it. People forget that New York is a very conservative town that includes Staten Island and Queens and Brooklyn, all of which have made progress, of course. Manhattan is the one that's gone backwards, you know, with all the rich people here. But you know, I'm just saying, we had to keep going. And, you know, we got a lot of heat within the community. Don't keep bringing this up and losing. We said we lose every day. We don't have the right. So we're going to keep putting people on the spot and demanding that they vote.
You have to talk about it to your family. You have to talk about it to your friends. You have to talk about it in churches and supermarkets and schools and libraries and everywhere. You have to. Those who are our allies have to make themselves known, and they cannot remain silent. And that's otherwise the people, the small minority of opponents, are the ones who are going to win. This mayor, after casting his his no vote at 3 o'clock in the morning, says, you know, we're all equal here. We're all equal. And if you can't sit side by side when you disagree, shame on you. Shame on you.
That's just like 1984 talk. I mean, ridiculous.
After casting his no vote on the ordinance. On the other hand, thank you to Roslyn Park, Kansas, which passed a non-discrimination ordinance with the support of the mayor, who broke the tie in favor there.
Well, let's give them some more good news. The Gay Games is underway.
Yes, it is.
And it's in Cleveland, Ohio. And they got a message of greeting from the President of the United States, and we'd like to share it with you.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the 2014 Gay Games. And to the thousands of athletes, coaches, family, and spectators from around the world, welcome to Ohio and the United States of America. Since 1982, the Gay Games have given lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender athletes and supporters around the world a chance to come together to compete, celebrate, and inspire others. It's been remarkable to see the Games thrive over the years. We've also seen America change in that time. Even since 2006, when the Games were last held in the United States, in my hometown of Chicago. We've come a long way in our commitment to the equal rights of LGBT people here and around the world. I'm proud of my administration's record and of the citizens who've helped to push for justice. And I know some of you have come from places where it requires courage, even defiance, to come out, sometimes at great personal risk. You should know that the United States stands with you and for your human rights, just as our athletes stand with you on the field at these games. After all, the very idea of America is that no matter who you are, what you look like, where you come from, or who you love, you can make it if you try. That's who we are. That's who we should continually strive to be. But we're also a country that loves competition, so let's get these games underway. Good luck to the athletes. Have a great time in Cleveland and Akron, and go Team USA.
That's a great speech. I wish you'd given it to the African leaders when they came for the summit. We'll talk about that later.
I wish you'd go to Billings and give it.
All right. In Washington, D.C., at the Congressional Cemetery, we have a picture of this. A design has been selected for the National LGBT Veterans Memorial to be placed in the memorial garden there. Pillars placed in a triangle. The cremated remains of LGBT veterans will surround the memorial. Plots are actually being sold. It's also very near the grave of Sergeant Lenny Matlovich, who came out on the cover of Time magazine in 1975. The president of the cemetery is Paul Williams, an out gay man. Put that in your pipe and smoke it, right wing.
I thought the design looked a little like a closet.
Well, it's a triangle. We're very into the triangle. I don't know why we're into the triangle, because that was the Nazi symbol for us.
Well, meanwhile, Jennifer Long, a transgender vet, has applied to the Defense Department to change her gender on her military documents. This is a very dicey issue that comes up.
Yes, you transition, and you want to apply for a job, and you need your papers from the old days, and you're essentially forced to come out as transgender when you may only just want to be known as who you are, a new woman or a new man.
We have a local news report on this, so let's take a look at that.
This soldier spent more than 30 years in the Army, working just about every tough job there is, from drill sergeant to reconnaissance behind enemy lines to active duty in Iraq and Afghanistan. But since leaving service a few years ago, the former sergeant major has made a significant change.
He knew something was off. why you were attracted to certain things, why you felt better a certain way.
About 5 years ago, this Army veteran made the monumental decision to begin living as a woman, legally changing her name to Jennifer.
Those are my original dog tags. I had them hanging around my neck for about 30 years.
Jennifer says she wants that part of her life to stay in the past, not to pop up again and again demanding explanation. But the Department of Defense has refused to change an important military form, the DD-214, required for everything from job applications to VA medical enrollment.
You see me and know me as Jennifer. Now all of a sudden you get a document that says otherwise.
Now, the ACLU of New Jersey is representing Jennifer and one other transgender veteran in their efforts to change their records. They filed their initial papers last week and are awaiting a DOD response. If they are successful in changing the policy, they hope it improves the lives of what some LGBT groups estimate are 140,000 transgender veterans living in the U.S. today.
Our clients are in the unfortunate position of having a DD-214 that doesn't match who they are currently. And because of that, when they show their papers, they have to really out themselves. They might be outright denied benefits or services, and we think that's just not fair.
In a statement, the DOD says they won't change a name on the original D-214 form based on the service's interest in maintaining the accuracy of its historical records. But they said they will place a letter of certificate in the applicant's official service record, verifying a name or a gender change.
I just want a document corrected, that's all.
Nicholas, the other veteran represented by the ACLU of New Jersey, said he shouldn't have to explain his gender change to every new doctor, bank, or potential employer. And even when he does, some of them still won't accept it because it appears with the wrong name on those documents.
I'm disappointed. I don't hate the military, I'm just very disappointed.
We're here, we're good citizens, we've served, I've served with honor. I'm just asking for my name to be changed. I'm not looking to rewrite history.
Tom Yamas, News 4 New York.
And lest we forget, the military still discriminates against active duty transgender service members.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which.
One of whom is Chelsea Manning, who's in prison at Fort Leavenworth. And the ACLU has intervened in her case, too, and has said to the Defense Department, if you don't start supplying her the medically necessary treatment that your panel has agreed she needs within the next week, we are going to sue you.
Well, let's give them some more positive stories. Out of South Dakota, and we have a picture of this guy. His name is Nate Alfson, 25. He's the first openly gay high school coach in the state. He coaches girls volleyball at Del Rapids St. Mary's. I can breathe, he says, I can smile, and I'm not afraid to cry, and I'm not afraid to feel the way I'm feeling. He's very happy about coming out. It's quite liberating.
Yeah, well, he might be afraid of losing his job. This is a Catholic girls' school. He's not sure he has a contract. And even if he does,
right.
It probably...
Morals clause
yes,
or something,
exactly.
which they like to invoke against us. They're always calling us immoral.
Yeah, he tried to reach the school before he came out and didn't succeed in doing so.
You know what? I probably never told the story on the show. When I got out of college, I'd been president of the Gay Student Union, but I thought, what am I going to do for a living? And I thought, I'm very connected to my old high school, Catholic school. I'll go back and teach there. Well, obviously they knew about, I'd been pretty public, and they're like, what the hell were you thinking? And they got very angry at me, like I was trying to trick them into hiring me so I could sue them or something. Well, there's no law protecting me in New York. I just thought we were old friends. Why shouldn't I? I was pretty naive.
I had no idea.
I wasn't 25 though, I was like 21.
Yeah, okay.
I'm glad I didn't get the job. Otherwise, I wouldn't be doing this kind of stuff.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, look, I had a very close friend of the movement who went to teach high school after being very involved, and she went back in the closet to teach. And
yes.
She'd been very, very public.
It happens. Well, this may be the moment to give the results of a survey that claims that LGBT people are almost half not religious, a quarter highly religious, whereas
much less religious than the
non-LGBT.
Right.
Exactly.
And more Democrats, like 2/3 Democrats, I think, is the latest
of
thing.
out-identified people. But there are some Republicans. The Log Cabin Republicans are holding their Spirit of Lincoln dinner at the Grand Hyatt in Washington, D.C. on September 17th. Mary Cheney will keynote the dinner.
And Paul Ryan
is attending.
The former vice presidential candidate. He's not pro-gay, is he?
I think no, not particularly, but Mary Cheney must have really been transformed by her experience of rejection by her sister in her sister's failing Senate campaign, and is now more willing to speak out. A sad story from San Francisco. Brian Higgins, 31 years old, a prominent radical fairy known as Feather.
Radical Fairies is a group, by the way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Harry Hay used to be in it.
A long-standing group, great, peaceful
Anyway,
people.
this man was found unidentified in a park just above the part of the Castro in San Francisco, injured, but
severely beaten.
So severely beaten that his family took him off life support. They do have some surveillance video of a white man in a dark hoodie. That's all that they know.
Yeah.
They're trying to find the perpetrator.
Terrible
and apparently there's
story.
been a big uptick in violent crime in San Francisco.
Well, and we hear about a lot of attacks here in New York, and then you have the cops killing young black men, and it's discouraging news.
Yes.
Which makes it a little jarring, I guess, to give a little piece of nice news.
Well,
You know, what do you?
No, go ahead. Give him some nice news.
Well, the Navy christened a new research vessel named after Sally Ride, and her surviving partner was there to break the bottle on the boat.
America, I christen thee, Sally Ride. May God bless this ship and all who sail in her.
You know, I have a soft spot for Sally Ride.
She was the first woman in space. It was a big deal.
Huge
And
hero.
interesting women in science and all those kinds
Absolutely.
of things. Not out during her lifetime publicly.
No, but very deliberately out at her death.
Yes. In Polk County, Florida, they are trying to entrap young men seeking adult partners, the police, by pretending to be adults and then switching on the kids, the young men, this is for heterosexual and homosexual, and then trying to arrest them. And judges are onto this and saying, well, wait a minute, what the hell are you doing? And what's the script here? This person didn't express any interest in children, and then you said you had a child and you were going to involve them, and then really, so they're so desperate for these kinds of arrests. They act very self-righteous about it. Obviously, you want to catch predators.
It's so much easier than going after real crime.
Well, that's what they do. In Los Angeles, a gay man is suing a doctor who listed his homosexuality as a chronic problem.
Oh, my God, yes.
So he's suing, he says, they've apologized. They said, oh, it was due to
software problem.
This is
but the doctor...
let's name them, the Torrance Physician Network.
So this guy goes to the doctor. He finds out that he gets his medical records at some point, finds he's been listed as having a chronic condition. He complains.
Yeah.
They say they've changed it and taken care of it. Then a year later, he finds out that it's been changed from chronic condition to chronic problem.
Right.
They apologize, say it was all the software
Well, what do you
problem.
want us to write down here?
The doctor, he confronts the doctor, a woman, I am embarrassed to say, who said to him, well, you know, opinions in the medical community go back and forth.
In Uganda.
That was her response when he complained that that's what she had written in his file.
In Hawaii, Governor Neil Abercrombie, who enacted the same-sex marriage, they lost re-election in the primary. It seemed to be over other issues. In Florida, State AG Pam Bondi is asking a Florida judge, that's on same-sex marriage. I apologize, how we do that. I want to talk about the midterm elections, because all the stories we're reading about the midterm elections that are coming up, folks, this fall to a voting place near you, have the Republicans taking even more state houses, taking over the United States Senate, obviously maintaining the House. They're all making their plans for how they're going to dismantle all the programs since the New Deal. I mean, it's shocking that this is happening, but some of it is linked to the quote-unquote unpopularity of President Obama. But folks, wake up. I mean, if you value your Medicare or your Social Security or, you know, anything, there's a tendency
the last vestige of hope of controlling the police.
There's a tendency in this country when people are sort of uneasy about the current leader to like go the other way, but not looking at what they're voting for.
Yes, that's the country we live in. Well,
stick with the devil you know.
Look, at least they elected Obama twice, but really, you cannot be complacent. The lecture 10 minutes ago was Speak Up. The lecture in this section of the program is Go Vote.
Right. And did we tell them that we talked about the murder of Yasmin Shan in June, the transgender woman who was left behind some building or something like that? Well, they have arrested a closeted man who was apparently, as the perpetrator in this, Terry Lynn Brady, linked, who apparently, Shan wrote on Facebook that Terry liked to be with men, and this was like a retaliation for outing him. But we'll have more on that as it
all right.
develops.
Moving across the seas?
Sure.
Okay. Well, actually, let's start with a very disturbing video of an incident in Jamaica. We've talked for many years about the homophobic laws, the anti-sodomy laws in Jamaica, and the attacks on gay men and others in Jamaica. So we actually have a local video of
show you the bad atmosphere.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's the news.
There was pandemonium at Young's Plaza in Maypen, Clarendon yesterday evening as police were forced to rescue a homosexual male from an angry crowd. The details on how it all unfolded in this report. Literally hundreds of persons converged in the parking lot of Young's Plaza in Maypen Saturday evening as news spread that a gay man had sought refuge in a clothing store. All eyes were fixated on the entrance of the business place, which had to be manned by the police. So how did it get to this? Eyewitnesses say the gay man was seen on the plaza putting on lipstick, much to the annoyance of passers-by who ran him down, and he ended up inside the clothing store. Persons inside, we were informed, were concerned about the young man's safety and locked the door, then called the police. In no time, news had spread that a gay man wearing lipstick was locked inside the store. With their smartphones in hand, people were positioning themselves to take a picture. For those who could not get close to the store, they stood on carts and on vehicles. Back in the crowd, persons were heard expressing disgust at the fact that a man was openly wearing lipstick in a public space. As the crowd grew, more police reinforcement arrived. It was now over an hour since the man had been locked inside the store. When the door opened, it was clear that the time had come for him to be whisked out. By that time, the police cleared the entrance, pushing the crowd back, and there was chanting. And with the police escorting him, the young man emerged with his face and head covered. He quickly jumped into a waiting car, which was driven by a police officer. But as the car drove off, the boisterous crowd could no longer be restrained. In the meantime, shop operators lamented how this incident affected business for the remainder of the evening.
Again, doesn't matter. It's horrible. I mean, it's a mob mentality. I ain't taking my vacation there, I can tell you that.
I've been there a couple of times, but I have no interest in going back.
Noel Coward used to spend a lot of time there.
Johnny Cash.
But, you know, in June, thousands there demonstrated to uphold the anti-buggery laws, which they called them, which were passed by the British in 1871. But there were demonstrations at the Jamaica consulates in Toronto, New York, and London. We have some pictures of those demonstrations to fight these laws. You can get same-sex relations between men, 10 years at hard labor, and they did these demonstrations to coincide with the 52nd anniversary of Jamaican independence. So how about repudiating colonial rule and getting rid of these laws? You saw that, well, some of the signs said, well, never mind. It's a colonial issue.
It is, because this kind of attitude was brought here to the Caribbean and to Africa by British colonialists.
And despite repression.
And India.
And despite repression, 17% of Iranians are telling the government that they're gay. What the hell kind of, we only get 3% here, and they get 17?
Yeah. Well, it was a survey of students, 142,000 students, so it's young people.
Well, at least Ahmadinejad can't say we don't exist there anymore.
I guess not. There was the U.S.-Africa summit here last week at a business dinner. Nigerian President Goodluck Jonathan was approached by a gay Nigerian refugee, Michael Ighodaro.
Yes.
The Goodluck Jonathan said, the situation of homosexuals in Nigeria is delicate, but during this week the topic has come up a lot, and it is something we will continue to look into, especially the attacks. If you think the law is unconstitutional, the anti-sodomy law, you have the right to go to court and fight it down. Now, that's a little disingenuous.
The president wasn't very explicit about gay stuff at the thing. But
he talked about human rights.
But there was a business dinner with the Secretary of Commerce and Mike Bloomberg. Did you read about this? And Bloomberg was asked by the Washington Blade, you know, about pressing gay rights with these things. And he said, my views on gay rights are well known. He said, but it's not our job to go and try to promote things that I think countries should adopt. It's like, Mike Bloomberg.
Except buying my computers and making me richer.
That's all it is with him as money. Now in Uganda, President Museveni is urging Parliament not to reintroduce the extra anti-gay law that was overruled by the courts on procedural grounds. He says it's not a top priority and could hurt economic development.
We have been back and forth with him and these laws so many times.
Well, the Attorney General was making an appeal to the court, right?
Yes, yeah, he was going to appeal the striking of the anti-gay law. Thank you. But so now Museveni, after being in Washington, has slowed it down. But all of this, none of it has anything to do with anything but his ability to make money for himself in his corrupt ways.
And with all due respects, we report a lot about these extra anti-gay laws, but there are 70 countries that criminalize homosexuality or more. And Kenya has a ban, and they're considering another big one, but people say it's not going anywhere.
But here's the real news from Uganda and the U.S.-Africa summit. Uganda has hired a lobbying firm in D.C. run by ex-Representative Vin Weber, who was a very prominent Republican.
Minnesota.
Yes, exactly. To do PR and lobbying for them in D.C.
And they got a new government in India, and they're looking to bar same-sex couples from adopting children. Singles have been able...
Can we show the Pride Parade in Uganda?
Oh, sorry. Oh, of course. Give them the good news.
Yeah. So when the court did overturn the anti-gay law, the Pride celebration went ahead in Uganda, and people came out, some of them in masks, because they know there's still an existing anti-gay law. But 100 people showed up, colorful, happy, proud.
I know many people in New York.
I like that sign. Some Ugandans are gay. Get over it.
Yeah, that was started by Stonewall in the United Kingdom. So yeah, that's terrific. A lot of people used to wear masks in the New York parade as well, or hats with sunglasses and things like that.
Yeah, there's a law against that here too.
Yeah, oh, that's true. We have an anti-mask law.
Yeah, so yes, in India they want to bar adoption. In Kenya, they're debating a life imprisonment or stoning to death
Not supposed
law.
To be going anywhere.
Okay, we've said that about Uganda, too.
Well, in Liberia, Catholic and Anglican leaders signed a letter blaming gays for the Ebola outbreak. Catholic and Anglican.
Yes. All right. Better news. In Baja California, Mexico, the Cabo San Lucas area, 9 couples have applied for marriage based on an earlier positive ruling on marriage. They're trying to expand this to a full nationwide law after interim decisions.
In the United Kingdom, the first priest to marry his same-sex partner, because they're allowed to get civil partnerships but not marriage, is suing his church for nixing his appointment to the National Health Service being a chaplain. He says a considerable number of chaplains are gay or lesbian, and that he wants to set a precedent, to allow marriages.
Yeah, because he was refused by his local bishop. In Israel, they have announced they've just changed the law and decided that married same-sex couples married elsewhere can immigrate and get citizenship in Israel.
Under the law of return.
Exactly, but they're still...
The Orthodox are furious, as you can imagine.
And they're still not allowing same-sex marriages to be performed legally in Israel, although there are a lot of benefits for same-sex couples.
In AIDS news, well, and health news, one of the things about Ebola is that the Sierra Leone doctor who died of it while leading the fight against it there, Dr. Sheikh Humar Khan was a medical officer for the AIDS Healthcare Foundation and ran the AIDS treatment clinic there. More than 60 doctors have died in the Ebola outbreak.
There was a note in the paper today about they had this ZMapp medicine that is, they think is going to help cure some people, and they were debating whether or not to give it to him and decided not to. And then they gave it to the 2 Americans who are now in the hospital in Atlanta recovering.
And it's getting out of control over there, and folks, with once it gets into the urban environment, forget about it. I mean, the reason it's been contained in the past is because it kills quickly.
Yes.
And it's been in isolated tribal areas.
Yes. Seattle, Washington, the mayor and the city council have signed a letter asking the Federal Food and Drug Administration to lift the ban on blood donations by men who have sex with men.
This is not Fox News, but there might be a problem with Obamacare. Advocates say that people with HIV are being discriminated against, made to pay a percentage of costly medications, not a flat copay.
Yes, bad news. Patients are filing complaints with the Department of Health and Human Services.
All right, okay. All right?
Yeah.
All right.
Moving on to entertainment news.
How about that John Travolta? He's suing a former employee who was his lover because he's broken a confidentiality agreement, but all this stuff keeps coming out at the trial that the judge keeps coming out, so it makes headlines. So one of the secrets that he tried to suppress, we got a picture of him here with Diana, in 1985, was that the night he danced with Diana at the White House, he slept with me. He went back to his hotel and slept with a man. Why is that a scandal? I've done that. I've done the show.
I wasn't even going to do that story, but
I've done this show with a woman for years, and I go home. We used to go home and have sex with a man.
No comment.
Okay.
In Charlotte, North Carolina, the Levine Museum of the New South is doing a gay exhibit, LGBTQ Perspectives on Equality, Local and National Stories. That is going to be up through January 25th. If you're in Charlotte, you might want to look for that.
The great gay George Takei is helping fund a web series taking place at a Boy Scouts camp, spotlighting the group's anti-gay policies. He's a former scout, and the show also explores how the identity of the American male has changed over the decades.
One of the most honored musical plays last year at the Public Theater was the production based on Alison Bechdel's Fun Home, which was itself a multi-award-winning graphic novel.
Yeah.
And we just love the book, love the play, love her, recommended all of the above to everybody. Well, on April...
Book and lyrics by Lisa Crone, and Janine Tesori did the music.
Yes, and on April 4th, next year, the production will open as a Broadway production at the Circle in the Square Theater.
All right. All right, here's my Toulouse-Lautrec item. I went over to the Museum of Modern Art, MoMA, and they have a great exhibit there of Lautrec posters. And there was a big card there explaining that Toulouse-Lautrec mostly hung out with women. and most of them were lesbians, including, you saw the picture there of Jeanne Avril, which is a very famous image there that everybody knows. She was a lesbian. They had their own bars and nightclubs in the 1890s, and they were allowed to take him in. They mostly barred men, but they let Toulouse-Lautrec in. But, you know, it all goes back to, like, I didn't know any of this stuff, and it all goes back to, like, we think we invented homosexuality in 1969 or something. But, of course, it was always there, and there were always a social milieu, and I'm glad that that history is finally coming out in a mainstream environment.
Didn't you have a second picture?
Yeah, the second picture would a little bit more evidence of lesbianism, of women dancing together.
Overt.
Not necessarily lesbians. I don't know these two. But that was one of the pictures in the exhibit.
Well, I was taken by some overt lesbianism on TV this week. Sort of snuck in under the radar. Showtime is running a documentary made by Eileen Chaikin, who produced the L Word on Showtime, the fictional series with Jennifer Beals that was so fantastic. I love that show. Much better than the real L Word, which came later. But she has now done the L Word Mississippi, which is a real documentary of lesbians in Mississippi.
How are they doing?
Well, it's a very mixed bag, and she has a very mixed cast there. Mixed racially, mixed religiously, mixed in their a lot of families, a lot of kids.
How are they doing? How are they?
Well, these women are, some of them have been rejected by their families, others are getting along fine with their families. They're all out and very visible in the community. Some of them are more femme, some of them are more butch, some of them are very conflicted about their own homosexuality, others are not. I mean, one of them talks, she's a main character, and she has rejected her homosexuality and is very involved in the church and has a gay son who she is trying to bring into the church, and he started going, "What, are you crazy?" But it was a fascinating documentary, and I don't think it's gotten enough play. It's called L Word Mississippi, and it's playing on Showtime and is available on Showtime On Demand. And I would highly recommend it.
Well, my friend Douglas stayed at a gay guest house in Berlin this past year, and he said there was a guy, an Orthodox Jewish guy, every morning who would get up and pray not to be homosexual, and then start getting on Grindr and going on dates every day.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't working.
But that's what that was the formula in his mind. Not like he had control of it, but like this supreme being was somehow going to take control of him.
That's what they tell you to do in AA, right? Turn it over to a higher power.
Yeah, but you have to make the decision to do certain things.
You could also just embrace your gayness, as many of your Orthodox and other brothers and sisters have.
I would suggest it makes for a lot easier life, but what do we know? Well, we know that there's a lot of news these days, and we're continuing to follow it, and we will see who here next week with more of it. And if you want to be on our email list,
write to me,
andyhum@aol.com.
Thank you for watching.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.